Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil rock.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
Welcome back to Riff Worship, where we sit down and figure out what makes a riff, what we think is a riff, and how a riff. I am joined by my co-host, Austin Paulson. How are you doing today, bud?
Oh, I'm so fantastic. I am so happy to have our third mic, basically, returning with us this evening. You may know him from such episodes as Holy Diver, as well as our In Utero album analysis. It is Justin Rutherford Swindle III. Justin, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great.
That's not your middle name, is it? That's not your
No,
middle
it's
name.
Taylor. Taylor's my middle name.
Hell yeah, brother.
How are the knees, man? I know you just got that new fancy walker.
I went to a show last night, so they could be better. My knees could be better.
Yeah, I know at the time of recording this, what was the show?
It was Soul Glow and MS Paint.
Heck yeah. Well, I know you'd recommended that album, that MS Paint album on one of the previous episodes that you were on. How did it translate to live? Have you seen this band before in the action?
I watched their like audio tree, which just came out like a few weeks ago, but I'd never seen them live, but I thought it was great. I thought they sounded good and they played great. But I love Soul Glow. They're like my favorite punk band, and they didn't disappoint.
Yeah, I think they're one of the best going right now. I know they announced like a tour with Zulu as well. I know it'll be coming through here. I'm not sure how close it'll be to either of you guys.
It's going to be in Nashville.
It is
at
in
Exit
Nashville.
In, I think.
Oh, really? Oh, perfect. That'll be so much fun.
I got to say this. I had a friend from Arkansas that came in to see me before my surgery, and he's a big fan of Soul Glow and Zulu as well. And he was like, yeah, I think they're the best at doing the whole like rap metal thing. And I heard him say that and I went, I have a really close friend that would hear you say that and would have a completely different opinion on that.
They literally have a rap song like on Diaspora Problems. There is just a song that is a rap song.
Right. The way he was referring to it was in a manner of like, oh, they're doing the whole
New
like
metal.
Oh yeah,
Limp Bizkit.
and I went, I think they're more of a hardcore band, but I could be wrong.
The album we're talking about sounds nothing like
what we're talking about.
Nothing at all.
We are talking about Cryptopsy's None So Vile.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. This is something. The album was released in 1996. So what are we at? Almost 30 years, just shy of 30 years that this album came out. And this is this has a whole lot going on in a short amount of time.
It is brutal. It's gross. It's fast as shit. I'm familiar with the band. I'm familiar with some of the songs on it. I'd never actually listened to it all the way through before. I don't know why exactly. It's not like a purposeful thing. Like it just never really. I love the intro track for sure. Like it's classic. Right. Even the ending was like something that we had joked and talked about for many years leading up to this episode. But I had never given it a proper listen until now. Swindle. I don't know if you've ever listened to this record before. What was your mindset going into this record?
I haven't really listened to that much death metal in general.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd probably listen to one of 5 death metal albums that I've ever listened to like the day before this. So I wasn't like, it didn't make me want to vomit or anything.
Well, that's good.
I thought it was better than the album I listened to the day before.
Did it make you want to eat worms?
No, very little does.
So the reason like I even brought this album to your attention was that there's elements of obviously death metal, there's elements of thrash, there's elements of, you know, a whole lot of different things on here. And I thought he was lagging. I had no concept that he was sitting there eating gummy worms.
Continue.
He's been going for like 30 seconds.
Had no concept.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm just eating really quick. Go ahead.
Yeah. God, I love anytime the three of us are together and a band has somewhat of a gimmick or anything like that. One of you two or myself will have to dig in and just lay into the rest of them about, oh, it's me, Fozzie Bear, waka waka waka, and just go at it. That is something that I understand only the three of us do, and nobody else gets it. Nobody else ever will. It's like watching a movie for the first time with somebody, and it's one of us in a room. It's getting shit on.
Oh,
It could be
It's
like
just-
a really classic movie, and I'd still probably find a way to make fun of it.
It could be my favorite movie, and I'll shit on it.
somebody that we're friends with watched the season premiere of Twin Peaks when like the newest season came out, and they were like, I fucking hated watching that show with them. Like, I actually wanted to watch episode 1, and there was no way that I could watch that episode with them.
Yeah, I think you almost have to watch everything with us. It's unfortunate because I know it's irritating as shit. Like, I get it. Like, I totally understand why anyone would hate watching a movie or a show with any of us three. CJ, our good friend. It's just not gonna work. But I'll totally pick up on all the nuances of things while I'm
absolutely
making my fart and wiener jokes, I guess, about it. But
I was gonna say that's why we always choose the worst movies. We don't.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to pick like a good movie that you want to pay attention to. You want to pick green-eyed snake zombie from outer space, or whatever movie.
Speaking of disgusting things like None So Vile, like I remember the last time we were all together in a room, we put on a movie without really much context of what it was, and the thing that made me laugh so hard was that we're all into very similar things. The moment the Trauma logo came on, and we all just collectively, yeah, but we watched it. It wasn't bad. It wasn't. I've seen far worse Trauma films.
It wasn't bad enough, honestly.
That's
it
fair.
was too good. It was too good for what we were getting at.
Man, I know we got to get back to the topic here, but I got to say this. I watched Barbarian for the first time recently, and by the end of it, I wanted to put my head through the wall. The minute that inbred individual crawls out from the base, Swindle, if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry. The minute this inbred thing crawls out from under the basement and starts looking at Justin Long going, Bubba, I was like, okay, he's either doing a great impersonation of CJ or the Iron Sheik. It's either or. And I was like, I'm done. I can't watch this. So like for the last 3 weeks, Lauren and I have just been like chanting that at each other.
I dug it. I didn't. That was filthy. That was a filthy flick. But speaking of filthy things,
okay,
1996, None So Vile.
So back to what I was saying. The reason I wanted Swindle to listen to this was because there were aspects of grind all over this album, all over it, and just at the speeds and the technicality of that. And I was like, this is right up Swindle's alley. I doubt he's ever heard it, but I would love to hear his first impression of hearing it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I feel like this album, and again, I didn't listen to this era of death metal 90s albums, so I don't know if this is just this Cryptopsy album or it's the whole genre at the time, but I can definitely tell where like metalcore and deathcore, like there are breakdowns on this album.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
There like a lot of breakdowns.
Yep.
There's like the weird like 4-beat pauses where there's just like a drum solo for 4 beats or like a bass solo for 4 beats, and then they just like get back into the like they use weird solos as a like a transition,
segue.
I guess. Yeah, right.
I think that's like
that was definitely a thing.
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say that was definitely a thing in metalcore that came from this album.
So this is kind of an outlier during this period. You know, a lot of death metal in 96, 95, 94 still had a lot of the Florida sound or the Swedish sound. And this was an interesting one. This was almost more technical than some of the technical bands. This was also maybe the first introduction to what is referred to now as like brutal death metal. I mean, the vocals are in it, and you know, you can't understand a single word he's saying legitimately. The lyric sheets, like it's the stuff's on there, but he's not following along. He's like cutting syllables out, all sorts of stuff. He's just like winging it.
I had to follow along. All right, I wanted to look it up because I'm like, this is so like egregious, like what he is doing vocally. It's really cool. Don't get me wrong, but it's not your corpse grinder. Like there's no enunciation whatsoever on this record. So, and you're really not going to get much help looking up the lyric sheet. Although I think our good friend Dan Greening, otherwise known as Lord Worm, was an English lit major. I found out.
He sure was.
Is fantastic.
So funny thing about this record with that is he was an English major, but they were the first. They were one of the first bands in Canada that were bilingual. So like they were, you know, a couple of the guys were French speaking, a couple of the guys were speaking English. So again, this is an outlier record during that period, Swindle, of not a lot of albums sounded like this or a lot of the guys played like this. I believe their band prior to Cryptopsy called Necrosis was a more straightforward grind band with some death metal elements to it. And they had an album prior to this one called Blasphemies Made Flesh that is more rooted in that traditional kind of Florida sound, maybe even the New York death metal sound at that point. Whereas this one just went over the top with everything, got more technical. So this is a rarity for that one. So again, I was really excited for you to hear this one. And I was like, oh, this is a bonkers record I've been listening to since I was like 14. Like, he's got to hear this.
We did that Magruder Grind episode. I was on it. There was an interview they did, either the vocalist or the guitarist, that said something like, I feel like we can't really experiment with like how volume, like how loud or soft we are as a band. So we just experiment with speeds. Like we'll like play something wildly fast and then crushingly slow. And obviously this album came out like 15 years before that Magruder Grind album came out, but I feel like it's kind of the same thing. Like this album, there's one song that has like a piano part or something,
Bobophile
organ part at the very beginning, but otherwise like it's a brutal album. It's very heavy all the time, but there are a lot of times that they're like they'll have a part and then double time that part and then go back to like the regular speed and then, you know, play a breakdown or whatever. A lot of speed experiment going on.
While I think certainly like Lord Worm, his vocal style and what he's doing is certainly a highlight of the record, in my opinion. Flo is probably the hero. Before we really get into the weeds with this thing, I just want to say that dude really makes this record. His drumming is incredible, and the intensity and the speed at which he plays is so insane. And
so
it's even great. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say.
I think you're about to hit it. Go ahead.
It's the intensity that he is playing with, the speed and like the skillfulness of it, but the fact that he was sick through the entire recording process of this record, often having to like lay down in between takes just to like try to recoup. I think he even like shouts out of just pure like just like, you know, we've all done stuff when we're sick before, like you got to go to work or whatever, you're doing something physical. I couldn't imagine playing like this for a record. I wonder what he would have done had he been like 100% the whole time, because this is crazy.
So I'm glad we're talking about that, because I think he's the only constant member in the band to this day. So his drumming, this band is known for his drumming. The big thing on this record is it had to be recorded quickly. It was recorded in just a span of a couple weeks, maybe. Yep. But the drums in particular were recorded in 2 days. 2 days, live take.
Yep.
Every time. It was a live take. There was no editing. So what I really love about this record too is how, I hate to use the word raw, but how unprocessed maybe the recording was, because you can hear the tempo shifts. You can feel it when and even at points where it's not supposed to. And it's like, oh, they're just playing faster because he's probably sick and just like trying to get through the song.
Yeah.
And the big thing on here for me is like, he's so technically skilled, but there's one drum bit on here that I'd never heard before until I heard this record, which was a gravity blast. This album has it all over them. And during those grind parts, those really just high, 280 BPM parts, he's doing, gravity rolls, which Swindle can probably explain what a gravity blast is better than I can. I just know it as the rubber pencil trick.
So the stick that you're hitting the snare with, you basically use the middle of the stick as a fulcrum. And if you're watching on video, if that's a thing for this episode,
you should be watching this on video.
When you go down, you get one hit, and the head of the stick points up, and then when your wrist comes back up, you get a second hit when the head of the stick faces down. So for every time you move your hand, you get 2 drum hits.
And that helps to increase the speeds and increase the tempos by doing that. Or, I mean, you're like this guy and he can just whip them out at any point. And it's like, we're going to play it like a nice, solid, 200 BPMs is like to slow things down a bit, but I'm still going to gravity roll through it. The drums, I'll say this was the first time I'd heard drums on a record like this. This was also the first time I heard like slap bass and kind of more funk inspired techniques on a death metal record. This was bass player Eric Langlois.
Yeah.
This was his first album with the band. They had kind of poached him from another local death metal band at the time. I believe he may have even been a Primus fan. So I'm sure that's why a lot of that was there.
He was really came up and it made sense on my like just reading it. I'm like, okay, this nerd. I mean, good nerd, but like nerd.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the first time I'd heard slap bass used on something other that wasn't like a new metal record at that point. And
it's not
this
jarring,
was like
though.
No.
It's sorry, I didn't mean to. I just want to say that I've never heard anything like that on a record like this, but
right.
It fit really well. Like just it really added some unique characteristics, like kind of like we were talking about in the Holy Diver episode, was just like it's a little touch there. No one's really doing stuff like this before. And I'm glad he really threw it in there. Thanks, Les. Appreciate you, dog.
They use it really well in here because usually the bass break will introduce the breakdown, and it just shows the impact of the breakdown kicking in. I mean, hell, there's a bass solo in Slit Your Guts. At the tail end of it. Again, right before like the mosh part or the breakdown. You also had the technicality of the music increasing because they had a new guitar player as well who took the bulk of the writing on. I'm going to butcher his last name. John Levasseur. Basically was a Dream Theater fan. and liked really technical stuff. And I mean, there's technical stuff all over this record
for sure.
But the solos are also less wank, and they actually have a key. You know, a lot of death metal music at that time, it was this keyless kind of chaotic noise, aside from a couple guys. And he's one of those guys that actually put a key perspective on it.
Sweeping, doesn't he do sweeping?
Yep.
Like,
oh, it's on there
arpeggios?
Too. Yep.
Yeah, like also taken like between the bear and me, definitely listen to this album.
No, I agree. There's a lot here that, and I think you'll find that a lot of people will kind of cite this album, especially in like the more modern era, as a huge influence on their playing. The Dream Theater thing really was kind of funny too, and I think there's been this like video being shared around on like Instagram or something of I forget if it's Napalm Death with the singer of Dream Theater or if it's Barney doing.
It's Barney with Dream Theater.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that.
They're doing Damage Inc.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that one.
Not to go too far off topic, but we've been talking a little bit about some of these like hardcore like breakdown parts. I think it's Benedictine Convulsions. Holy shit, dude. That came out, for it to be so intense through a really good portion of this record, and then to kind of get hit with some of these like absolutely, I could imagine kids just beating the shit out of each other to some of these tracks for sure.
Like the final track on the record, Orgiastic Disembowelment, has a nasty one that goes right. Man, that thing hits hard.
That's the best breakdown of the album.
Ooh, and it ends the album with that lovely sample.
Run home and cry to mama.
yeah, that Army of Darkness sample.
Yep.
There was I didn't remember if it was Benedictine Convulsions, or Graves of the Fathers. One of the two of them. It's one of the 4-minute songs, but there's a breakdown like halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's almost exactly halfway through, and I was like, are they about to do this breakdown for 2 minutes? Is this going to finish off the song? But then they brought another couple parts in. But I was just like, who knows where this is going?
You mentioned Army of Darkness. I don't want to forget the opening sample of Crown of Horns, Extras 3. It's some classic opening track. We've mentioned samples on this show before. I think this definitely stands out as like one of the most like signature examples of using it well. But I, like you said, recorded very quickly, and also to kind of bring up our Holy Diver episode. I'm not sure if it was Lord Worm who was quoted as saying we had killer weed going into the recording process of it.
That may have been him.
He I was listening to an interview with Lord Worm with the maybe current vocalist.
Oh, you listened to the Vox and Hops episode.
Yes, he said in that interview that like the record is about 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
He did the vocal takes in about 35 minutes.
Yeah, I think he had he got like a ride from the drummer. I think he rode in with Flo, and they had like an 18-hour day or something, and I think he took in a bottle of whiskey for one of the interviews I heard. Walked in and finished, probably a good bit of the beverage, but yeah, he had to sit there like all day because he got all of his parts done so quickly. So he's just kind of like twiddling his thumbs.
God, I mean, in the middle of Canada, nothing to do. Like, what are you going to do? It's cold. What are you going to do? You just got to sit there and stare at a wall. Like, also knowing that his vocals are lauded on this record as being one of the first to ever sound that way. He's still known to this day as the most loved vocalist for the band. And he was only in the band for, at that point, 2 records. He came back in 2005 and did another record. But he's mainly known for the None So Vile album. And it's absolutely, I would love to hear isolated vocal takes of this record. Because I know there's spit flying. I know there's God knows what else going on that I'm not hearing, snorting. Like, this is any band that came after this, especially bands in the brutal death metal subgenre, or even maybe the slam subgenre, definitely owe a nod to this guy. And I believe he may have even been a few years older than the rest of the guys in the band too.
Yeah.
By this point.
Yeah, it seemed like everybody was still kind of young enough to live at home while he's, had probably already graduated, or he was still doing like college at this time. And I think that's kind of essentially why he left the band initially, was just because, hey, I'm kind of getting old, man. I gotta think through my life a little bit here. But you were kind of mentioning what came after. I really want to touch on maybe what came before, kind of during this band's, heyday. Was like, there really wasn't, not that I'm aware of, there really wasn't too many bands coming out of this region that really stick out to me. Like Voivod, I think, was really the only band that was probably on the radar. I know that some of the other bands in the area are like Gorguts and Cataclysm and stuff like that, but they're really, all of them, like you mentioned kind of early on in this episode, they're taking from the Florida scene. They're all influenced by your Cannibals and your Deicides and what have you. So I mean, from what I understand, reading a little bit into this backstory, that this band was kind of playing wherever they could get, shows. I think they said they could, and really everywhere. I mean, they would, sometimes in Canada, and I've only been a few times, there's a lot of wide open spaces, and this band would talk about like camping out in the Rockies, on tour, and, barely having any money to get back with like gas money. And so these guys were hitting it hard, and it really mattered to them to get out there and play and do well. So I think all of that definitely comes out on this record for sure.
There's a focus on the album too, because of, I'm sure, knowing how much time they had in the studio and knowing how much money they had for the actual recording of, they all had to know their parts through and through. There was no, I kind of know this part. It was, no, you have to know them. Maybe one or two takes on a couple things here or there, but we've got to get in and get this done. And now knowing that, after researching the album a little bit and hearing how the album doesn't sound like it has any sort of mistakes on it, I'm sure they're there. But knowing that they had to record something that fast, that is also that technically challenging, with every instrument. I mean, everybody's pulling their weight here. There's not a single person in this band that's just going like, oh yeah, I'm kind of, taking it easy today. I'm also sure that Flo probably wasn't thinking at whatever age he was here, mid-20s, early 20s, that like, oh yeah, when I'm like 50, I still have to go out and play Slit Your Guts and Crown of Horns every night with like these gravity blasts.
Yeah, that one of the interviews I watched, I guess they had recently done a tour for None So Vile. They played the whole album, and they were like asking the guys like what their favorite songs to play, and he was just like, probably not like Phobophile, because I played it every night for like 20 years. So just like any of the other ones.
It's a great song though. I mean,
it is.
That's like the one song to me that kind of has a little bit of not that some of the other tracks don't, but there's at least some sort of like melody or kind of hook to it a little bit.
They beat that riff up in that song.
Yeah, definitely. The recording is obviously very legendary. We've mentioned artwork certainly to death on this show. John the Baptist, the famous painting. I think it's like an Italian painter from like the 1800s. But yeah, just the head of John the Baptist on a plate, definitely sticks out to you. Like, you're not going to miss that record. It's definitely you're looking through it, your local music store, you find that on an album, you're going to like at least stare at it for a little bit.
I think the first time I heard anything off this album, I saw the title Slit Your Guts, and I went, I have to hear this. And I downloaded it from whatever torrent site I was using at the time. Hadn't seen the artwork yet. I don't think I saw the artwork until I read Choosing Death years later. And I remember I downloaded the song and then looked up like what other songs are on this album. I have to get all, and I downloaded each individual song illegally just so I could have the full length album. And then I saw the artwork after that and was like, all right, at some point I have to own this in physical form. I'm going to say this. I've never owned this album in physical form.
Damn.
I've always either had like a torrented version or some sort of download. I mean, I'd love to have it on wax, but they repressed it and it goes quick.
Yeah. Is it Century Media?
They repressed it and they redistributed it because it was I believe it was a self release in the States and in North America.
Yes.
In Europe, it was a smaller label.
Yeah, so there's a Swedish label called Wrong Again Records. And so they had the North American distribution rights to this, where they got kind of fucked, really, on the deal. From what I understand, it's definitely difficult to do this shit on your own. And for them to be such a young band trying to figure out all of the, logistics of getting this record out. I think they even, there was like a label called Cargo that was selling the CD without their permission.
Yep.
And they knew, they were like, well, we're just a new band. We can't really we're just a bunch of young kids. We're not going to be able to sue you for doing this. So I guess you win. I think they would even at times import it from Japan, which would, end up costing more to do than actually getting the record out. Like, it's just a very odd kind of thing, trying to figure it out as a young band. So I guess really the point I'm trying to make is that, we kind of are, we're kind of spoiled with being able to look back on it now and saying that this is a classic album, but really, when it came out, it really, it was great in the local scene and in Canada, but really nobody knew about this band. It wasn't until they kind of got out and played live, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But yeah, when this came out, it definitely did not have it hadn't made waves yet, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It's, we touched on this earlier where they played any and everywhere. And I'm sure when this album was released, that was still the mindset of, we have to go play this. We don't have great distribution in America. We're having to buy copies through, imports just so we have something to sell on tour, even if they had stuff to sell on tour at that point. I mean, I saw live footage of them playing Knoxville, Tennessee in 95 or something like that. And that would have been before this album came out. I'm sure the stuff had already been written. They were already playing Crown of Thorns. But I could only imagine in the moment you're not seeing, oh, this is going to be some sort of classic. This is going to be some sort of genre defying album. This is just going to be the album we put out now. And this is this great music we have, and let's put it out.
The interview I listened to, there was a funny quote. They went on the tour for this album and nobody came to any of the shows except whatever the last day in whatever city in Canada, may have been Ottawa or something. They were we sold out this venue for the last show, so on the way home we got to use the air conditioner.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, we're paying by the AC. That's crazy, dude.
I mean, that's death metal. Even now, death metal is not the most profitable music. I imagine in 95, 96, it's probably far less than it is now.
Yeah. Well, here's a question for you, just to kind of piggyback off of that. Certainly we are blessed in the modern age with so many great pieces of technology to get us to and from. You guys have both been on tour. I have unfortunately not been, able to experience something like that. Do you have any similar stories? Do you have any similar moments where you kind of had to forego certain, luxuries to get to the next place?
Swindle.
Well, you both know that the vehicle I went on tour with just didn't have air conditioner.
Yeah.
So everywhere we went was without AC.
And you, did you take that to Texas? Was that the vehicle you used?
Yeah.
For the unofficial South by thing? Oh my God, dude.
Right. But that was March. So even in Texas, it wasn't it wasn't 98 at that point. It was still moderate.
The first tour I did, we were actually coming back from the tour, and we were in Chattanooga. And if any of you guys are familiar with Chattanooga, like it's basically in a valley.
Mhm.
We were stuck in traffic at the top of the valley going back towards Nashville. And that's when we realized we have no more money for gas. So we were like, what can we do? What can we do? How do we get this sorted out? How do we get this all figured out? We're like, all right, we just kind of got to figure it out. And we made it into Nashville and we were still on fumes. And someone was like, I'm done. It's July. We're in Nashville traffic. We got to turn the AC on. And I distinctly remember a yelling match going over like, don't fucking touch the AC. And we made it to my house somehow. And as I live like 30 minutes north of Nashville, we made it on fumes.
Jesus. That gave me anxiety just listening to both of those stories. Well, luck would find this band, obviously through all their playing and all the kind of earning your stripes as you were. The now revamped Milwaukee Metal Fest occurred in '96, and they were able to play that, and that's really kind of what got them the attention. Is I think maybe some executives or whoever from Century Media were in the audience at the time, and were able to see the band, and like that's pretty much what sparked their relationship with that label. Some other I was kind of looking around to see if I could find live footage from that show specifically. And it turned out Carnivore and Madball played the same year as well, show. Which is crazy to see some of that. Madball was on that same show. Yeah, it was a very odd mixture, it seems like, just some of the names I was able to find. Definitely some stark contrast from ripping death metal to Madball and Carnivore.
That would have been at the height of like Typo Negative's success too. The fact that he was like, I'm gonna go play a Carnivore gig
in the middle of Milwaukee.
Yeah, weird spot, got to do it. It seemed like that show was the coming out for Cryptopsy to the U.S. I'm sure a few of the people that were in the know had probably heard the record before this one. Probably had even heard some of the demos before that. And a few of them probably had this record through imports, or I would say tape trading was still a thing at this point, and had like a third or fourth generation copy of that. I mean, this is one of those albums you could put on a cassette on one side and then record it on the second side as well because it's so short, and listen to it twice. I know when I first heard that song, Slit Your Guts, it just completely just threw me off with those opening guitar lines. I could only imagine something like this, being around when something like this came out and just feeling what the waves in the music scene were based off this. Because death metal had, let's face it, kind of started to grow maybe a little stagnant at this point.
Sure.
This was probably in the height of, especially when it comes to underground music, the height of like, black metal was at its peak popularity by this point. Thrash metal was still considered passe. Nu metal was hitting the tops of the charts. So this was a really weird time for like aggressive music and heavy music. And then you've still got people like this that are like, we just want to write the most extreme form of music that we know how to write.
Yeah, it's a very abrasive record. It is
without a doubt.
Like, I love heavy shit. That's why we started the show. Is like, I love talking about riffs. I love aggressive music. This definitely took me a few, like, it is so in your face and over the top as far as intensity that, I've heard this from a few people. I think it, maybe it turns people off. Like when you listen to it the first time, you're like, what is even fucking happening? It's so fast. The vocals are so like guttural and unintelligible. So I think, I don't want to say it's an acquired lesson, but it definitely took me a few tries before I was able to really kind of sink my teeth into this thing for sure.
This is gonna sound like I'm talking shit, but it's not. I'm not putting it down that opening riff to Slit Your Guts is like just on the edge of like annoying in a funny way and
Yeah.
annoying in like and just annoying way. But I
It's
love
nauseating.
I love so much music that like I'll like bands will play the same part for like 5 minutes or whatever, and I'm like, they're just doing this to piss people off. And I feel like that riff really rides that line.
Could you imagine you just like putting together a song just, oh man, fuck whoever's gonna turn this up.
This is gonna make people so mad.
Hey man, Sleep's Dope Smoker.
Teddy Lee rules, bro.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure
I'll never
part of
do
that
it.
was there.
I'll never do it. Not one time. Can't make me.
There are some parts on here that are nauseating, even just with how fast it is, how much repetition there may be, how things are. There's some harmony parts on here that are dissonant in their own part. So I get it. I completely get it. It's an abrasive record. I think the extremity of it at first was what got me interested. And then fully enveloping and listening to the whole album going, this is one of the coolest things I've ever heard.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, you know, I'd heard Heartwork. I'd heard Vile by Cannibal Corpse. I'd heard, you know, Morbid Angel, blah, 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 multiple classics. But I don't think I had heard anything this extreme yet.
No, I mean, even still now, there's really, again, I like a lot of extreme music, but
Yeah.
I don't know if anything has really captured that description quite like this record. Like still to this day, I mean, it's everything about it, from, you know, just the speed, the, you know, tenacity of it, the, you know, the lyrical content,
Right.
you know, even the stage presence, obviously we've mentioned a little bit. There is really something wild about this band in particular. It just seemingly kind of coming out of nowhere, you know, out of Canada. It's a fun listen. And I guess, you know, maybe to touch on some of the legacy of this band, kind of mentioned some groups, you know, perhaps take a little bit of, I guess some groups kind of take a little bit, you know, take an example from this group. Are there some modern bands that you would say are kind of encapsulating what Cryptopsy was doing in '96 in the modern era?
So there are, Canada's kind of known for technical death metal. I don't know what caused it. I believe Ian Dissonance is from Canada. Beneath the Massacre is from Canada. I mean, just the name too, right out the gate. I'm sure there's a couple like really obscure bands I'm missing at this point that I have enjoyed. The band that always comes to mind is one I'm a big fan of, which is Defeated Sanity. They're a great brutal death metal band with great technical chops, almost to a point where there's some jazz influence to it. I mean, that they have an album that came out in 2011, and as soon as I can find the title, I will let you know that the opening track on that completely was like the most abrasive thing I'd ever heard in my life. The album is called Passages into Deformity.
Okay.
Came out in 2013. So the opening, I believe it starts with an intro, and then there's a track called Naraka, and it just, every instrument fires at once. The vocals are firing as soon as the track kicks in, and it's extremely abrasive. That would be a band I would ache into this. But something about Cryptopsy, even the stuff that came after None So Vile, which the Whisper Supremacy album is one of my favorite albums of all time. And You'll Beg, or None So Beg. It's the album after that one has a new vocalist named Mike DeSalvio, who's I believe he's from Boston. So he's an American guy, and he's a little bit more of he almost sounds like a guy that would sing for a hardcore band. But even hearing that type of vocal over this extremely technical music is insane. Those albums didn't have that raw, like from the hip kind of feel to them, whereas this album did. Those albums definitely seemed like there was more structure to them, maybe more polish. But those albums are good too. If anybody thinks that this band stopped with Lord Worm, Check the albums with Mike DeSalvio out in them. But I think the brutal death metal genre, the technical metal subgenre, metalcore, deathcore, even some of the modern like tech bands owe a lot to this band. Owe a heck of a lot. And this band doesn't get near the attention or the credit they deserve for helping, expand the subgenre. Because they made a mistake, in I think around 07, 08, and they put out what a lot of people refer to as a deathcore album, and it's not. If you've ever listened to it, it's not in the least bit. There were clean vocals on it, but what's funny is here we are in 2023, and there's a shitload of death metal records with clean vocals on them.
It's true.
Ton of them.
Just kind of touch on 2023. I mean, Cryptopsy going to be putting out another record this year.
Yep.
As
Nuclear Blast.
Yes. So, and which is like their first in like 10, 11 years, I think, like a full length record.
Yeah. Yep. They've had a couple EPs in there, but you're right.
So, there's been at least a single or two that have been out. Yeah. As Gamora Burns going to be out through Nuclear Blast on September 8th. Just to check my notes here a couple times. But the singles I've heard definitely sound like Cryptopsy.
Mm-hmm.
However, you're kind of talking about this kind of legacy band at this point, implementing some modern influence as well. And I definitely hear that on some of these newer tracks as well, but not in a bad way where it's like, oh, you're just trying to go to trends or do whatever. Like it sounds very natural to this group, but it's just Cryptopsy in 2023. Like obviously you need to evolve and get better, but I think the songwriting is there. The songwriting has just gotten better. So what I've heard so far sounds great. I'm very much looking forward to it.
It's really nice to see them back on a larger label with a little bit more distribution.
Mm-hmm.
The last 10 years they've been independent and they've released, I believe, I can remember the back half of the names of the EPs. They were like Tome 1 and Tome 2, Book of Suffering, Tome 1 and 2. That's what they were. And those were pretty good. But not a lot of people knew about them because they were self-released. You either had to buy them at a show or stream them. And I think at the point that those two albums came out, streaming wasn't where it is now. So they were a little bit harder to find. They were good. It all sounds like Cryptopsy. It all just sounds like a different amalgamation of, all the ingredients to the soup are all there. And it's it's just got a different flavor profile each time it comes out.
Absolutely. It's a minestrone. Sometimes it's like a butternut squash. It's truly all the herbs, all the mirepoix is there. Is that right? I don't know. I've never worked in the kitchen. Swindle, you've worked in the kitchen. What do you think about soup? Do you think if Cryptopsy were a soup, what soup would they be?
I think something like a squash soup, because it's got like weird chunks in it and the texture is kind of off. I think they would want something like that, like for the spill your guts type or slit your guts type deal, like something that just looks gross.
I agree.
So before we wrap this up, I do have to say this. Around a week and a half ago, I had a hernia surgery. And the last thing that was in my mind as they're wheeling me into the operating room before they move me from the bed to the operating table is the opening riff to Slit Your Guts.
Jeez.
Because I was just like, I gotta have the humor in this.
Did you wake up when you came to? Were you just like, "Happy birthday"?
When I woke up, Lauren was there, and I said, "Why are you calling me Dylan? I'm Lenore."
To kind of round out our discussion, Swindle, as a first-time listener to this band, how would you describe this record to perhaps another first-time listener?
It's fast. Yeah, I think it sounds really good. I think a lot of times in metal, especially the bass will go like
Mhm.
just like flatlined, especially if a bassist is using like a distortion pedal, they'll just lose all the bass frequency or whatever. The bass
Mhm.
sounds amazing on this album.
Yep.
Everyone's very talented. Uh, everything sounds really good. It's very fast. It's relentless. I think it's worth a listen. I didn't listen to death. I've never listened to death metal, but I did listen to like mid 2000s metalcore,
Mhm.
uh, and grind and stuff like that. And I can hear a lot of this album and a lot of that music. Definitely.
Dylan, as a longtime fan of the band, how would you describe this record?
Um, Man, it's a mixed bag of nuts. I mean, you're gonna get grind, you're gonna get tech death in there, you're gonna get brutal death metal, you're gonna get a couple of the songs are a little more rooted in kind of old school death metal.
Mm.
There's a lot of it there. You're gonna get, as Swindle said, you're gonna get some great bass playing on this album, which from this album on was and is a major part of Cryptopsy's sound. Now, like if you put on a Cryptopsy record, the bass is pretty well up front in the mix. You also get almost a clinic on drums on this record. And this is not a slight against any of the guitar playing on this album because it's fantastic, but it almost takes a backseat to everything else. Like the rhythm section kind of dominates this album.
Yep.
You are going to get a great record. I would even suggest this to guys that want to get into death metal and go, hey, here's one of the more extreme things you're probably going to hear. Listen to this. And if you enjoy this, everything else is going to just be a cakewalk to listen to. It would be like, I wish someone would have handed me maybe like Jane Doe when I first started getting into like hardcore and been, you'll be fine after this. Everything else is going to be simple. Like you got it. I would akin this on, as like a Jane Doe. Or a Covenant like we touched on last week. One of those albums, just like a great gateway record, a great classic of the genre. Hopefully you listen to this band and you dig a little bit deeper into the Canadian side of what heavy metal is and what extreme metal is, because there's a lot of great bands up there. It's not just, poutine and better healthcare.
Maddie Matheson.
That's it. Those three things. That's all that's there.
Yeah.
It's not just Trailer Park Boys.
No, that's a good point though. I think music fans, especially in America, we have like a very insular kind of like view of music where we don't often think of other regions of the world in terms of like their importance to the genres that we love. So I would also agree with that. Like, check it out. There are very many classic bands, contemporaries of Cryptopsy. As I mentioned earlier, Gorguts, fantastic band, still also playing live and doing stuff. But None So Vile definitely stands out. You should definitely give it a listen and let us know what you think. Send us a message. Tell us what you thought of it. Are you a first-time listener? Are you a long-time listener like Dylan? I definitely want to hear about it. We've reached that point of the show again, where we have recommendations, things that we've been listening to, things that we love. Swindle, what have you been listening to this week?
The new Restraining Order album, Locked in Time. Their older stuff, very fast. This album, not as fast, but still nasty.
Yeah.
The new Ringworm single, Thought
Ooh.
Crimes.
Yep. Heavy.
Hell
Still,
yeah.
like, there's consistent as Crowbar. You just know exactly what you're gonna get when a Ringworm song comes out.
Yeah. And that new Mort Garson album, Journey to the Moon and Beyond.
Is that the cover with the, like, it almost looks like stained glass color on the front of it? I'm sure it's not, but it's like got a multiple. I think you posted it yesterday, Swindle.
It's like a dude in an astronaut costume, and there's some like yellow and orange and
that's
a butterfly in his. Yeah. It's like a collection of songs. He didn't write it as an album. It's just like a collection of songs that were used in like television shows and commercials. One of the songs was used in the CBS airing of the moon landing in 1969. It like played live when we landed on the moon. So that's cool.
Insane. I didn't realize the moon landing had like a score either. Obviously, like I wasn't there, but just the fact that you could, yeah,
yeah, it was playing. They had like loudspeakers on the moon.
Oh, dang,
More was just like playing.
Dylan, what do you got for me, bud?
So I've got a few, but I do want to name two Canadian bands that I've been a big fan of for a lot of years. Archspire's most recent record, Bleed the Future, which came out in 2021. They just released a new music video this past week. If you want the most technical end of death metal and something from Canada, it's that band. I mean, they have jokes. They have joke merch that says "Stay Tech" on it. Like it's fast. It's some of the most blindingly fast stuff I've ever listened to. And another band that I've always been a big fan of is Beneath the Massacre. Their album Dystopia is a game changer and was a big game changer for me. But what I've been listening to this week as my non-metal listen, the Gaslight Anthem has dropped a couple new singles, and I've always been a big fan of that band. And the most recent single is called History Books, which features the greatest gift to rock and roll that New Jersey has ever thought about having, which is Bruce Springsteen himself guesting on it. The new album is called History Books. So that's going to be nice. It's going to be nice to hear what that band sounds like after not doing anything for about a decade. One of the things that I listened to is something that just came out this morning. The new Dying Wish single.
Yeah.
I believe it's Watch My Promise Die.
Yeah.
That just sounds like some OG metalcore to me. Sounds like stuff from like the early 2000s. I really dig it. Think it's really cool. Think it's heavy as shit. And I guess the last thing is, again, I have been spinning the new Mizmor album nonstop. Prosaic is great. It's I can't say enough about it. I have the opportunity to see him in August at Dark Matter, and I bought 2 tickets, and I have to remember I need to remember to tell my girlfriend I bought her a ticket as well.
Well, definitely don't forget.
Yeah.
Get sad, Lauren.
We'll get sad real slowly.
I've been listening to a few different things here. There's like a newer Incantation single. Homunculus, Spirit Made Flesh.
That's it.
I know I don't know pronunciation. I don't know soup, and I don't know how words work. But
just
this
oogas and boogas.
New single is shaping up to be something that I've been listening to quite a little bit this week. That is going to be off of their upcoming record, Unholy Deification. My non-metal recommendation this week is a band by the name of Neckbolt. They just announced their upcoming full-length Dream Dump, which will be out September 22nd through Born Yesterday Records. The video for their latest single that was released at the time of recording this, Fenghua or Lucky Star, looks as if like you walked onto the set of Saul of the Mole Men, like from Adult Swim. Like I think the lead singer does a lot of some of the like artistic visual stuff for this band. He's a terrific artist, but the video looks absolutely nuts. And I would also recommend Gummy Worms. Pretty good.
So is that new album about Dusty having a bad night in the can?
I hope so. Looking like a melted ice cream cone.
Oh my God.
So you've been listening to Riff Worship. We'll be back next week with another favorite ref of ours. Maybe an interview, perhaps. You can follow us at Distortion.
Find a band that the vocalist eats like a bug that you can find a different gummy version of.
Oh,
like,
that'd be killer.
God.
I'll do it
Yeah.
on this show.
On our municipal waste episode, it's just gonna be him eating gummy sharks.
No, it'd be like me getting just hammered. Probably.
He has to crawl up from the chair.
The art of parting is good. We'll be back next week with another riff, perhaps an interview. We got some stuff in the works. Definitely some great guests lined up. If you'd like to give us a follow at Distortion891 for all updates on the show, as well as our live show, Vocal Distortion, which airs every Monday at 6 p.m. Central. There's a lot of good stuff over there. But until then, for the Swindler, myself, and good old Dill, you've been listening to Riff Worship.